Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're all well on this cold winter's evening. Beautifully clear sky though, I'll say that for it. And of course we're looking at the curfew tower, which we've already explored. But as several people are, Sam I know is very interested in it, and Elaine as well showed a lot of interest. A couple of people showed a lot of interest in as to when and where the Abbey all began. So for the first time I'll be able to take you to Valence House Museum, and we'll be able to see the foundation story and look at all the objects that were found in the Abbey over the years on the various archaeological digs. I'll also be able to take you to certain places within the Abbey. The Lady Chapel, the Saints Chapel, St Margaret's, which of course still exists, the curfew gate through which we're about to walk. The only surviving parts of the Abbey are this curfew gate and St Margaret's Church. The rest is ruins, and we'll also be going to the chantry where prayers for the dead would have been said. So off we go into the past, because in the day you would have walked through this gate and would have been looking straight at the Abbey. So join me for the foundation story of Barking Abbey at Valence House Museum. Then at the end of that you'll join me back here for an atmospheric evening wander around where I'll be able to show you some of them places. Off we go. And here we are inside Valence House Museum, and the foundation, the story of Barking Abbey, and also the items found in the archaeological digs over the years. The first Barking Abbey was founded in 666 AD by a priest named Erkenwald for his sister Ethelburga. The first abbey buildings were constructed of wood with walls of wattle and daub and foundations of reused Roman tile and stone. And the church we're looking at here is St Peter's on the Wall, Bradwell-on-Sea. Essex built it circa 660 to 662. It's one of the earliest surviving Saxon churches in England. Erkenwald, founder of Barking Abbey, from a woodcut of the 1500s. The Abbey buildings were constructed of wood with walls of wattle and daub and foundations of reused Roman tile and stone. The founders of the Abbey and their relatives lived in the patron house. Archaeology has revealed fragments of extremely rare coloured glass, silver coins and bone combs, which show how affluent the occupants were. Erkenwald, who became Bishop of London, died while on a visit to Barking Abbey in 693. He was buried at St Paul's Cathedral, the old St Paul's that is. Soon after, he was declared a saint, and his shrine became an object of pilgrimage. Viking Attack. In 871, Barking was attacked by the Vikings. The abbey was destroyed, and the town became part of the Viking-controlled Danelaw territory. It is thought that the nuns fled to their City of London estate, which later became the parish of All Hallows Barking by the Tower. That'll be one that we'll be visiting soon because it ties in with all this. Barking Abbey was rebuilt under the royal patronage. The English regained control of the Danelaw in the 900s, and Barking Abbey was rebuilt as a single-sex Benedictine nunnery under the patronage of King Edgar, who reigned from 995 to 979. Barking Abbey became a royal foundation where the monarch had the right to choose each new abbess. Now, one, a decorated bone comb. Bone combs are incised with line and dot decorations, 7th century. Found during the excavation of Barking Abbey site in 1990. Number 2. Metal ring with a set stone, medieval bronze. Number 3, stone set brooch, originally a coin from the reign of King Athelstan, AD 924 to 939. It was turned into a brooch and set with a tiger's eye, semi-precious stone. This was probably done to commemorate Athelstan's involvement in liberating Essex from the Viking rule. 10th century silver. That's this object we're looking at here. Four. Is this one here. Number 4 is a pin used to fasten clothing. It is topped with a rooster that is decorated with a ring and dot design, 12th century, made from bone. Number 5, which is this here, is a toilet set. This would have hung from a nun's belt and was used for personal grooming, such as scooping earwax from the ears. 9th century, bronze and copper. Found during the excavation of Barking Abbey site, 1985. Number 6, which is this object here that we can see, is a girdle hanger. This would have been worn on the belt with items such as the toilet set hanging from it. It is decorated with dot design. Medieval bronze. Found Gurpin's Farm Cemetery. So that's one of the things that came from Gurpin's Farm. Was when the abbey was taken down over the years, it became used as a farm, so that's what that was, but it's the nuns' cemetery where this has come from. Seven here. A strap end would have formed a decorative end to a belt. One of the original leather remains inside, 14th century copper, found during the excavation of Barking Abbey site in 1985-1986. 8, which is this impressive item here. A square-headed brooch, typical of the high-end jewellery worn by Saxon inhabitants of Barking Abbey in the 6th century. 6th century gold-plated copper alloy, found in the nuns' cemetery, 1937. We'll move over to our next item here. Number 9, a headless statue. Figure is holding 2 orbs topped with crosses and was possibly an altar decoration, 9th century, made from clay, found during the excavation of Barking Abbey site. Number 10 is this one here, the head of a figurine, 9th century limestone, found during the excavation of Barking Abbey site, 1985. This bead possibly from a nun's rosary, medieval, made from onyx, found during the excavation of the Barking Abbey site, nuns' cemetery. Oh, and this, I absolutely love these. There's 2 of these. Because these, you know that the Saxon nuns would have held these in their hands. They were very educated women. They would use them to write and about mistakes. They're styluses, not in the stylus the sense that we think of them. Stylus, pointed end, was used to write on wax tablets. The flat end was used to rub mistakes. Ink and vellum or parchment would have been reserved for the most important documents at this time, because they were so expensive, of course. 7th century bronze, so from the 600s, in the foundation of St Ethelburga's Abbey. Amazing to think she could have held those herself. St Hildalitha, who came after her, she could have held them. 13, these 3 loom weights here. These were hung at the bottom of great standing looms to keep the yarn or the warp taut during weaving. 7th century, made from pottery, found during the excavations of Barking Abbey site, 1985. These 2 here, thread pickers, also known as a weft beater. This was used in weaving to push the weft yarns along the warp yarns. Saxon, made from bone, found during the excavations of Barking Abbey site 1985. That ring could have been on one of the fingers of the abbesses or one of the wealthier nuns. Think of the history that can tell, eh? Bone comb, 7th century, so from the time of the earliest abbey, which could have combed the hair of saints. Well, that's the findings there. Take you over to here. Influential and educated women. The second abbess, Hildilitha, was held in very high regard as a lady of virtue and learning. Adhelm, abbot of Malmesbury, dedicated his book on virginity to her. His writing reveals that the nuns were highly educated in biblical studies, ancient law, history, grammar and spelling. Depiction of a 14th century abbess from the Luttrell Psalter, a medieval book detailing everyday life. Queen Matilda, 1102 to 1167, from the Golden Book of St Albans, circa 1380. Her mother, granddaughter and great-granddaughter were all abbesses of Barking. The Crown donated vast estates and revenue to the abbey, making it rich and powerful. This royal policy made the abbey the second richest in the country. Harold Godwinson, later King Harold, swears allegiance to William, Duke of Normandy, later William the Conqueror, as seen from a Victorian copy of the Bayeux tapestry. So William the Conqueror stayed at the abbey. Don't forget why the White Tower of London was being built. Following the abbey's establishment as a royal foundation, all the abbesses were appointed by the king. They came from noble and high status families. King Henry I and his successor Stephen both made their wives abbess, and Henry II and John appointed their illegitimate daughters female relations of the king's. Major supporters were also appointed as abbess, such as Adelissa de Burgh, who was related to the powerful Northumbrian barons. More unusual was the appointment of Mary Becket by Henry II as an apology for killing her brother Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury. Royal visitors. William the Conqueror spent the latter part of December 1066 and New Year of 1067 at Barking Abbey, while the White Tower of London was built. He received the surrender of the great Saxon Earls of Mercia and Northumbria and other Saxon lords. William was the first of many monarchs to stay at the abbey. The last would aptly be King Henry VIII, its destroyer. These pieces of carved stone all come from buildings within the abbey complex. They date to the 12th century, when most of the abbey was rebuilt, and illustrate the types of decoration that were used within the buildings. And if you remember the Curfew Tower and the Holy Rood, see how the patterns match? If you go back to the Curfew Tower and watch, this sort of what we'd call sort of pineapple type pattern matches very well with the Holy Rood in the Curfew Tower. So think of all the history that these stones have seen over the years. It's fascinating. This piece here and that piece there, they're from decorative window cornices. You see the grooves, that's where the glass would have gone in, held in place with lead cane. Painted plaster from the Lady Chapel at Viking Abbey. The decoration seems to show a human figure bound by red lines, 9th century, so from the 1000s, so from William the Conqueror's time. Spiritual offerings, belief in the power of prayer was extreme in the medieval period. Viking Abbey played an important role in religious Viking Abbey played an important religious role in supporting the king and the country. The king took his position, his land and his crown from God and granted the land and status to the abbess as his subject. In order, the abbess and nuns supported the king by praying from him and the royal family. A page from the Viking Ordinal. Original detailed of the Abbey's religious festivals and celebrations. That's in the British Library. A page from the Viking Abbey Hymnal. This book contained the words and music for the Abbey's hymns. Engraving of the Hospital Chapel of St Mary and St Thomas of Canterbury, Ilford. St Margaret's Church was originally a chapel built in the grounds of the Abbey, as we'll see in a minute. The abbess was also responsible for the souls of the people who worked and lived locally. The prayers offered by the Abbey were seen to be of vital importance to everyone's well-being in both the present life and the afterlife. Rich and poor alike left money or gifts for the nuns to sing masses after their death. That would have been done in the chantry. Charity, good deeds reinforced the Abbey's spiritual power. The Hospital Chapel of St Mary and St Thomas at Canterbury, Ilford, was founded in 1145 by Abbess Adelicia. It was originally a hospice for aged and infirm men, but later treated lepers. The abbess provided ample funding for its long-term upkeep. St Margaret's Church was originally a chapel built within the grounds of the Abbey. In around 1300 it became the parish church where local people worshipped separately from the nuns. It survived the destruction of the Abbey and remains as the parish church of Barking today. Pilgrims were also attracted to Viking Abbey to view the painted stone carving and crucifixion known as the Holy Rood. It can still be found inside the curfew tower, as we've seen. Here is the model, the big model for, or the mock-up really, for what's outside the curfew gate now, the bronze one. And you get to see the great abbey. All that remains of it today is the church and the curfew tower. You see the cloisters. And where the ruins are, I'm going to be able to take you to the Lady Chapel in its little turret area. The Saint's Chapel. The Nuns' Cemetery, which is there. All these bits and pieces. Obviously none of it survives anymore, but from the plans and stuff were bits and pieces I know where I can take you. This is the infirmary where the sick would have been kept, and the infirmary chapel. These buildings over here are the kitchens, because they always kept them far away from the abbey and such like, in case they caught light and burned the whole thing down. There's just a couple of buildings on the outside of the town. Lord of the land. The abbess was given the title of Lord of the Manor. In this role, she controlled the lives of most of the inhabitants of Barking and Dagenham. The rules of the manor enforced social hierarchy of the lords and peasants for 500 years. Held in the abbey's buildings, the manorial court controlled transfers of land and dealt with the maintenance of roads and bridges in the area. The marketplace was regulated by the abbess, who ensured that the correct weights and measures were used. The remains of 2 pillories were also found by archaeologists at the site of the abbey. These are the earliest known pillories in Europe and were used to punish people who had committed minor crimes. With their heads and arms locked in the pillory, the criminals were pelted with rotting vegetables by passers-by. The abbess had total control over her land and the roads, ditches, bridges, woods, windmills and watercourses within it. The river roading was of vital importance to the people of Barking for transporting goods. The abbess was responsible for maintaining the town quay, dredging the river and maintaining many miles of Thames river walls to protect the grazing marshes from flooding. She also controlled Barking watermill on the river roading. Strict rules prevented anyone else in the manor from grinding flour. Even by hand, all grain had to pass through the mill on the town quay, making it a focal point of the town. There it is there, and also making a big fat profit for the abbey, I may add. Oh, did you see that? I say. What became of Barking Abbey? In 1336, King Henry VIII began the dissolution of the monasteries, closing religious houses and seizing their property. In 1536, seizing property. Barking Abbey was survived longer than many because the king's representative was a close friend of the last abbess, Dorothy Barley. It was eventually surrendered in November 1539 and the nuns retired with large pensions. Henry VIII. The demolition work began in 1540 and was complete 18 months later. Did you know that on Shrove Tuesday, the day before Lent begins, the nuns of Barking Abbey ate pancakes or waffles? Detailed accounts show that the abbey was almost completely destroyed. Demolition work began in 1540 and was complete 18 months later. The finest stone was transported across the Thames for use in the King's Manor House at Dartford. Lead from the roof was used to repair the Royal Palace at Greenwich. Small halves to melt the lead from the window surrounds have been discovered across the abbey site. A modern view of St Margaret's Church from the southeast. A bird's eye view is showing St Margaret's Church and Barking Abbey site as they were in the 1700s. See, this is what I say, it was used as a farm. And see there, look where the school is and that now, the Barking Abbey School, there was still one of the gates there then. This is the only one that survives, the curfew tower. It's the Abbey ruins. But, yeah, it was pretty much used as farmland. And there's the church, which still survives. The only buildings to survive was St Margaret's Church and 2 gateways. One was the curfew tower, which survives today as the entrance to St Margaret's Church. The other was the smaller North Street gate, now demolished. By the end of the Victorian period, most of the abbey's site had been built on. In 1910, a new road, Abbey Road, was constructed through the part of the site. The remains of the main abbey buildings were excavated the following year and laid out as a small park. Over the following decades, the land enclosed by Abbey Road and the Broadway was cleared. Among the buildings demolished were the Elizabethan Courthouse, the houses on Back Lane. So, as our kind friend told us at Barking the other day at the Curfew Tower, Masters Match Factory. Eventually, in the 1970s, the cleared land became part of the central area open space and conservation area. But for part 2, join me back at Barking for all that remains for an evening atmospheric wander round, and I'll be able to take you to the Lady Chapel, the Saints Chapel, and of course the Curfew Gate, and the Chantry Chapel as well, which was just there, which is where they prayed for the souls of the dead. So join me back at Barking for part 2. Welcome back to Barking on this evening, and we're looking at 13th and 12th century, and over there the 12th century Abbey ruins. But to get back to the earliest origins of the Abbey, we have to go right through the churchyard, cross over Abbey Road, and go to the edge of the River Roding, which will take us to the origins of the Saxon Abbey. So that's where you're going to join me now. So we'll go right through here and cross over. And here it is, our location. We are on the banks of the River Roding. It was up this river that the Vikings would have come and attacked the Abbey in the 900s. So, as the sun sets over modern London, you have to consider what that night would have been like, because it was a nighttime raid. The nuns had fair warning, obviously, because they managed to escape to their London estate, which became All Hallows by the Tower later on. But here, this building site that we're looking at right there, that's where, for anyone that knows Barking or knew Barking, where Halfords used to be. That was put up in the late 80s, early 90s. And this site that we're looking at is where all the early things from the Saxon Abbey were found, all the artefacts that we saw in Valence House. Anything from the 600s to the 900s came from this site. So this is where our Anglo-Saxon ladies would have been. And our saint, and where those bone combs and everything come from. And that's really the start location for the first Barking Abbey. It was destroyed by the Vikings and then refounded by King Edgar. And to get to that site, we must cross back over the road, where I shall take you in a minute. We must cross back over this way, so bear with me while I pause you. And we now leave the 600s to the 900s behind. The Saxon Abbey, the Viking Attack, the rebuilding. Don't forget St Ethelburga came to that abbey and died there. Obviously, when he was ill, like most family members do, he either would have requested to be taken to his sister, or requested to be taken to Barking for some reason, because St Ethelburga, his sister, was the abbess here, so it's more of a human link, shall we say. Quite a nice human link as well. Sad, but nice, if you know what I mean. And now we leave that era behind. We go back to the abbey that we know the most about, the 12th century. The Abbey of the Norman era. And we saw a lot of the objects, didn't we? The stones, the wall plaster from the Lady Chapel, the painted wall plaster, we saw that too. The pins. Those pins would have held in place a nun's habit and wimple. So you've got those as well. The ring. All those items came from this site. And Halfords, as I said, which was the site of where the old abbey was located, that's now being built on with luxury flats. And before that all happened, new archaeological excavations took place on the site all along here as well. because when they did the 80s lot, they only did it over that bit. So there, it's a kind of watch this space kind of thing. Let me pause you. Now we cross over Abbey Road, a much more recent incarnation than our abbey here, and we cross into the 12th century abbey. And as I said, I will be able to take you to certain locations here. Our first is going to be the Lady Chapel. This is evening atmospheric, and you're thinking, we're not going to be able to see anything. London Look has thought of this, so bear with me, my little pretties. I have my 1000 lumen torch with me. When this was all set out, after the 1910 archaeological excavations, because don't forget there's been quite a few over the years, 1910, 1984 to 85, then some more recent ones, as I say, and those are a watch this space on, because they did the digs, they did find things, so I shall be definitely very much watching that space. But we're walking along the imprint, the abbey walls. Where we're about to walk into or across now are what would have been the cloisters. Ooh. Sorry, I fell into a hole, and that's my go-to dropping down unexpectedly noise. That you got it again. You get it in Eastbury Manor House. We're now walking into the Lady Chapel, and in the model that I showed you at Valence House, you remember one of the turrets. This is one of those, and this area of the abbey is said to be quite haunted. In here would have been a chantry, an altar to the Virgin Mary herself, hence why it's called the Lady Chapel. So it would have been one of the more sacred areas in the abbey, and we stand within its footprint. We see the abbey walls as they go off. And now I'm going to take you to the most sacred location within the abbey, the Saint's Chapel, which is over there. Pretty good, this torch, isn't it? And it's extremely heavy too. So lest anyone should try anything, they will get that swiftly smashed across their face or head. This is the most sacred area in the abbey, the Saint's Chapel. Now, when the nuns of Barking rebuilt their abbey in the 12th century, they rebuilt it within the confines of their abbey ground, because they own a great swathe of land, don't forget. But they moved St Ethelburga and St Hildelytha, and this is where they moved them to. And apparently when they took up St Ethelburga, bearing in mind this was some several hundred years after her death, she hadn't decomposed. So on these steps somewhere, if I can find it in the dark, yes, pilgrims still come here. And as you can see, someone did in 1946, T. Smith, 1946. And the story is, and I know this from my friends at Barking, that was a man that came back from the war and was very grateful to have been able to do so, and came and gave thanks here. Now we stand within the most sacred area, the Saint's Chapel, where you have St Ethelburga, St Hildelytha, and the daughter of Catherine Swynford, the royal abbess. I was able to recently find out. I knew she was a royal abbess, but I didn't know her name or details. So that will flash up now. And here, this area that we're going to walk up onto, this is the nuns' cemetery, which was a farm in the 18th and 19th century. Don't forget, Catholicism wasn't only illegal back then, after Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. It wasn't only highly illegal, it was highly disliked. So they were no respecters of what this place was or stood for. It was only really in the late 19th and early 20th century that the history of this place really became what we think of it today, and people got into it and celebrated it for what it is. But those pins that would have held in a nun's wimple and habit, the girdle end, that all came from here. Under our feet are buried many generations of different nuns. So this is the nuns' burial ground, the Saint's Chapel. Oh, I'm pleased with this torch. Now I'll take you to the second most sacred area, the chantry. As we read in Valence House, prayers for the dead were a massive part of daily life. They would not only pray for the royal family, dead and alive, the local people would pay, even the poor, would pay for masses to be said for their souls. So if you had any ancestors that are pre-Reformation, the next area we're going to go to is very highly likely where their souls would have been prayed for. And we pay our respects to the saintly ladies and the royal abbess. This is part of an old font that was found within the abbey, so many children would have been christened within that. And along here, this wall here is really the only original standing wall left of the abbey. When they took it down stone by stone, they left this wall standing so it differentiated the churchyard from the newly deconsecrated and defiled area. And we walk past T. Smith from 1946. I've done paranormal stuff here in the past. It's very active. If that's something you would be interested in, again, let me know. I still have the equipment. And this area here is our next port of call. This was the chantry, where all the prayers for the dead would have been said on a daily basis, and for however long someone paid to have masses said for their soul. That's where it would have been done. The saints would have been prayed for in their own chapel, but everyday and ordinary people, and the rich patrons as well, they would have been prayed for here when they departed this world. And I don't like this area. It's extremely creepy. I've had some unusual experiences here and nasty feelings. It's more a weird thing. Not nasty, no, that's wrong to say that. It wasn't nasty. Odd, shall we say. And this is the chantry. You see these old bits of stone that remain. As I say, the churchyard wall really is the only main big wall of the abbey left standing. You can see this along here where I'm pointing, that's the abbey wall. And a lot of the stone that came down from the abbey, they differentiated their churchyard with it. But there are rumours as well that in the Great Plague of 1665 that people were buried along here because they ran out of room in the churchyard. It's not a massive churchyard. It was only charnelled every 100 years or so. That means taking up the bones of long dead people to make room for new dead people. But while we're here at the chantry, this is a good place and a good opportunity to remember and have a look at the abbesses of Barking. So we're going to do that in a way that they would have liked, in the place that it would have been done, bearing in mind that they are no longer with us. So off we go as we pray for the souls of hope you all found that interesting as we leave the chantry. Little laugh for you. I've just chatted away happily to you for 6 minutes and it wasn't recording for some reason. So I told you that place was weird. It always has so if you use paranormal equipment, it always has a weird effect on it. It once drained a set of brand new Duracell Ultra batteries, brand new ones, on a spirit box. But yeah, as I was happily saying to you, in those days the Abbey played a massive role in the lives of the local people, as we've learned. And over there where I'm pointing the torch is where the infirmary and infirmary chapel would have been. They kept the sick quite away from the well. Even in those days they may not have understood what disease was, but in an age where leprosy and things like that and the plague were prevalent, they understood enough to keep sick away from well. And also another interesting factor as well, in those days, in an age before pensions and retirement plans or care homes or anything like that, if you were one of the wealthier patrons of a place like this, and Barking Abbey had a few of these that did it, the wealthier patron, if they didn't have any heirs or anyone to look after them, and they'd lived to a great age and started to grow infirm and didn't have anyone to look after their lands and such, what they could do is gift or will or deed their lands to the Abbey under the condition that the Abbey would look after them as they grew old and sick. It was called a corrody, and you'd be granted a corrody. Your property would be within the bounds of the Abbey. You would have servants allotted to you, your meals would be provided, and you would be cared for in your corrody. Anyone that's interested in this kind of thing, watch a series called Monastery Tudor Farm and you'll learn about corrodies there. Barking Abbey had 12 corrody residents at one point. All would have been wealthy. If you go to the British Library, I'm quite sure you can probably find the deeds and things like that, because these people would have deeded their lands to the Abbey. So a big thing like that wouldn't have just been jotted down on a little slip of paper and popped in a drawer. It would have been made something big of. And those people would have been cared for. Unlike the poorer people and the sisters who would have been cared for in the infirmary, the rich people would have been cared for in their corridors. Like a care home kind of thing. So like you're at home, like carers. Like that. And we look over there to where my ancestors are all buried, over in the corner, being fairly poor. That bit of the family had a bit of money though, the Maywoods that are there, apart from old Mother Lee, my ancestress. Seems a disrespectful thing to call someone, but it was a respect term in Essex in those days for an elderly midwife, and she lived well into her late 80s and grew to such an age that when she came to church she had to be carried on a chair. And when she died, the Parsons family, who lived in the town, they were pork butchers and wealthy. All of their children and some grandchildren that she delivered, and maybe obviously done a good job of it, they paid for her to have a private burial and grave. And it's noted down in the church book that she's buried at the back of churchyard near her kinsfolk. So we know my Lee ancestors will all be over there. Her husband Henry, he didn't have a private grave. He died about 19 or 20 odd years before her. But yeah, here we see St Margaret's Church, Barking. This one can be a little bit creepy, particularly since the poor murder victims were dumped in that corner there. Those two young men that were killed for being homosexual and then dumped in this churchyard. No one has ever liked this corner since. With respect to their memories, eh? And pray for their souls as well, like we did the Abbey ladies. Do we need our torch? Is it helping or is it hindering? More. It's alright for these bits. We'll be crossing over in a sec though. Because as I say to you, the only bits that survive are the curfew tower, which I'm pointing at with my torch, standing survive, and the chapel of St Margaret's, a large chunk of which is 12th century and dates from the time of the foundation of the newer abbey. I nearly fell over. The Church of St Margaret's, which has stood parts of it since the 12th century. Shall we? And as we stand in the beautiful birdsong-filled churchyard of St Margaret's and see the future unfolding all around us in these new buildings, we have to consider back to the past and the world that those ladies came from, both Saxon and Norman. So, as we had a little nighttime wander around, this is just a little highlight to point out by daylight what we got. Right through here and crossing over the road as we did, right through there, the River Roding and the site of where the original abbey was located. Down the steps from churchyard into Abbey ruins, and we're not going all the way in, I'm just going to point out the highlights to you. Lady Chapel, just there. Saint's Chapel, just there. And just in the crevice bit of this wall here is the chantry. You see the Abbey ruins all laid out. It's interesting. Over that way is where the infirmary and infirmary chapel would have been. We're looking along here. This bit is the nave, or would have been the nave. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the foundation, the history and destruction of Barking Abbey. I hope you've all enjoyed. There may be more in the future from certain characters who feature in the Abbey's history. But yeah, I hope you've all enjoyed this one. Thank you very much for watching. And this is still a place of pilgrimage today. So we'll end off with the Saint's Chapel with St Ethelburga, St Hildilitha and the daughter of Catherine Swynford. Hope you all found this interesting, and thanks for watching.